Jerry Nadler had spent 3 weeks preparing for this moment. His team had gathered every piece of information about the Ohio State scandal. Press releases were pre-written. CNN had promised live coverage. And 35 years of political experience had given him absolute confidence that Jim Jordan, that country lawyer from Ohio, would be crushed on camera. But Nadler didn't know that inside Jordan's worn leather briefcase sat a thick manila folder. Inside were 16 years of financial records that Jordan's team had been quietly collecting. Monthly payments to someone the FBI classified as a foreign agent. Numbers that, when added up, would make the entire hearing room fall silent. And then, in a moment of desperation, Nadler would utter 2 words, just 2 words, but those 2 words would end his 35-year political career. 2 words that the moment they left his mouth, he knew he had just destroyed himself. This is the story of how a country lawyer with a pocket constitution delivered the most brutal political execution of 2025. The hearing starts routinely enough. Chairman Jordan calls the session to order, reads the standard opening remarks about government accountability. The gallery is packed, but not electric. Just another Tuesday morning in the swamp. Democratic members shuffle through their prepared talking points. Republican staffers check their phones. Even the C-SPAN cameras seem to be operating on autopilot. But Jerry Nadler has other plans. For weeks, Nadler's staff has been preparing what they call the kill shot. Opposition research files spread across conference tables, strategy sessions running late into the night, press releases pre-written and ready to distribute. The 77-year-old Nadler, dean of the New York congressional delegation and former Judiciary Committee chairman himself, has decided this is the moment to end Jim Jordan's political career once and for all. You see, Nadler doesn't just want to win this hearing. He wants to destroy Jordan so completely that he'll never recover. He wants to make Jordan radioactive to his own party, poison his presidential ambitions, and remind everyone in Washington that Jerry Nadler is still the master of political combat. Nadler's calculated strike. 20 minutes into routine questioning, Nadler makes his move. The room's energy shifts as he adjusts his signature glasses and leans into his microphone. Experienced reporters sense something coming and stop scrolling their phones. Democratic members straighten in their seats. The gallery falls silent. Mr. Chairman, Nadler begins, his voice carrying that familiar prosecutorial edge that's intimidated opponents for 3.5 decades. Before we discuss investigating corruption, perhaps we should address the elephant in the room. The temperature in the room drops 10 degrees. Everyone knows what's coming. How can someone who allegedly turned a blind eye to sexual abuse at Ohio State University credibly chair an investigation into government misconduct? The room goes electric. You can hear photographers' cameras clicking rapidly. Democratic members nod approvingly, some barely containing their satisfaction. Reporters frantically scribble notes or type on their phones. The C-SPAN cameras zoom in on Jordan's face, searching for any sign of the devastating blow landing. But Jordan doesn't flinch, not even slightly. Nadler continues with prosecutorial precision, his voice rising with righteous indignation. For years, multiple wrestlers have stated under oath that you knew about Dr. Strauss's abuse but did nothing. You've paid hundreds of thousands in legal fees trying to silence victims. HBO documentaries have detailed your involvement. Former athletes have called you a liar on national television. He pauses for maximum effect, the silence hanging heavy in the room. And now you sit there lecturing others about accountability while refusing to be accountable for your own alleged misconduct. It's a perfect political attack, personal devastating, designed to put Jordan on the defensive and make him look like a hypocrite. The kind of moment that ends careers and creates viral clips that play on cable news for weeks. Democratic staffers are already pulling out their phones to tweet clips. Liberal journalists are crafting headlines about Jordan being exposed and destroyed. Nadler sits back in his chair with the satisfaction of a prosecutor who's just delivered an unanswerable closing argument. But here's what nobody in that room expected. Jim Jordan has been waiting for this exact moment for months. Jordan's controlled response. Jordan doesn't fidget, doesn't stammer, doesn't launch into angry denials or emotional defenses. Instead, he does something that immediately signals to anyone paying attention that this isn't going to go the way Nadler planned. He smiles, not a big smile, not a cocky smile, just a small, patient smile that somehow makes everyone in the room slightly uncomfortable. It's the smile of someone who knows something you don't. The smile of someone who's been preparing for this moment longer than you've been preparing to attack him. Years of wrestling taught Jordan to absorb punishment and wait for the opening. In wrestling, the worst thing you can do is panic when your opponent makes a strong move. The best wrestlers stay calm, assess the situation, and then strike back with devastating precision. I appreciate the gentleman's concern for accountability, Mr. Nadler. Jordan says, his voice steady and conversational. In fact, let's talk about accountability. I think the American people deserve a real conversation about accountability in government. His tone hardens just slightly enough to signal that something has changed. But first, let me address your accusations directly because I actually believe in transparency. Jordan looks directly at Nadler. Every independent investigation, and there have been several, has found no evidence that I knew about any abuse. Not one credible witness has ever testified that they reported abuse to me. Not one document has ever surfaced showing I had knowledge of misconduct. These allegations have been thoroughly investigated by Ohio State University, by independent law firms, by journalists, and by political opponents. He pauses, letting that sink in. But since you want to discuss accountability, since you want to talk about transparency, since you want to examine someone's record, Jordan reaches for a thick manila folder beside his chair, the movement deliberate and confident. I've brought some materials that might interest the committee, because unlike some people in this room, I actually believe in letting the facts speak for themselves. The folder hits the table with a soft thud that somehow echoes through the silent room. Nadler's confident expression wavers for the first time. He hadn't expected this. His staff hadn't prepared him for Jordan to go on offense. You see, Mr. Nadler, Jordan continues, his voice taking on an edge that makes Democratic members shift uncomfortably. When someone starts throwing around accusations about accountability and transparency, I think it's only fair that we examine everyone's record. Don't you agree? Nadler tries to interrupt. Mr. Chairman, this is clearly an attempt to deflect from, "Oh no, sir." Jordan cuts him off gently but firmly. This isn't deflection, this is accountability. You opened this door, you started this conversation, and I think the American people deserve to see what's in this folder. The room is dead silent. You can hear the air conditioning humming, the clicking of cameras, the scratch of pens on paper. Everyone senses that something fundamental has just shifted, but nobody knows what's coming next, except Jim Jordan, and he's just getting started. Comment below if you think politicians who attack others should have their own records examined first, and hit that subscribe button because what Jordan pulls out of that folder next is going to shock even Nadler's own staff. Jordan opens the folder with the deliberate precision of a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. But this isn't just any evidence. This is 16 years of financial records that tell a story nobody in that room was prepared for. Mr. Nadler, Jordan begins, his voice taking on the measured tone of someone who spent months preparing for this exact moment. You mentioned accountability. You mentioned transparency. So let's examine your campaign finance reports from the past 16 years. He pulls out the first set of documents, official Federal Election Commission filings that any American can access but few ever bother to read. These show monthly payments of exactly $1,000 to something called the Friedlander Group. Jordan holds up the documents so the cameras can see them. $1,000 every single month for 16 consecutive years. That's $192,000 in documented payments, but we'll get to the real total in a moment. The room shifts uncomfortably. Nadler's confident expression is completely gone now, replaced by something approaching concern. Democratic members are frantically whispering to their staff, trying to figure out where this is going. Now, Mr. Nadler, I have to admit, I'm just a simple country lawyer from Ohio. So when I see 16 years of monthly payments to something called the Friedlander Group, I get curious. I do a little research. Jordan's tone becomes more pointed. And here's what I found. Azra Friedlander, the principal of the Friedlander Group, is a registered foreign agent under FARA. That's the Foreign Agents Registration Act for those following along at home. You can hear gasps from the gallery. Reporters are typing furiously. Even some Democratic members look shocked. But it gets more interesting. Jordan continues, his voice gaining momentum. Mr. Friedlander has represented clients with ties to Qatar, specifically Qatari oligarchs who have business interests that directly conflict with American energy independence. He pulls out another set of documents. He's also represented Russian interests, including a Russian journalist with ties to Kremlin-controlled media outlets. The mathematical destruction. Jordan stands up now, his movement commanding everyone's attention. This is the moment when the country lawyer reveals he's been doing his homework in ways that would make Harvard law professors proud. But here's what really caught my attention, Mr. Nadler. These payments didn't just happen during election years. They continued every single month, including during years when you weren't even running for office. He spreads more documents across the table. 2018, not an election year for you, 12 payments of $1,000. 2020, you were running, but these payments started in January, long before campaign season. 2022, payments continued after your election was decided. And Jordan pulls out a calculator, a simple basic calculator that somehow looks more intimidating than any weapon in this moment. So my question is simple, Mr. Nadler. Why has a sitting congressman been paying a foreign agent $1,000 per month for 16 consecutive years? What services was Mr. Friedlander providing that required such consistent long-term payments? The silence is deafening. Nadler opens his mouth, but no words come out. And here's what really interests me. Jordan continues, his voice becoming more pointed with each revelation. These payments continued even when you weren't running for office. So this wasn't campaign consulting. This wasn't voter outreach. This wasn't traditional political services. He looks directly at Nadler. This was something else entirely, something that required $16,000 per year every year for 16 years, something worth $256,000 in total payments to a foreign agent. Nadler's defensive scramble. Nadler finally finds his voice, but it's not the confident prosecutorial tone from earlier. It's defensive, flustered, desperate. This is clearly a desperate attempt to deflect from your own ethical issues, Mr. Chairman. These are routine consulting payments. Routine. Jordan interrupts, his eyebrows raised. 16 years of payments to a foreign agent is routine. $256,000 to someone registered to represent foreign interests is routine. Jordan pulls out more documents. Because I also found this interesting. During the same period you were making these payments to Mr. Friedlander, you were serving on the Judiciary Committee investigating foreign interference in American elections. His voice becomes cutting. You were investigating Russian interference while paying someone with Russian connections. You were concerned about foreign influence while employing a foreign agent. You were worried about corruption while making unexplained payments to someone registered under FARA. The room is completely silent except for the clicking of cameras and the scratching of pens. Democratic members look mortified. Even some journalists who came in expecting to cover Jordan's destruction are now frantically rewriting their stories. So let me ask you directly, Mr. Nadler. Jordan says, his voice carrying absolute authority now. What services did Azra Friedlander provide that were worth $256,000 over 16 years? Why did these payments continue during non-election years? And why should the American people trust someone to investigate foreign influence who has been paying foreign agents for nearly 2 decades? Nadler tries again. These are legitimate consulting expenses properly reported to the FEC. Oh, they're reported, Jordan agrees. That's how I found them, but being reported doesn't make them legitimate, being legal doesn't make them ethical, and being disclosed doesn't explain why they were necessary. Jordan sits back down, but his presence somehow fills the entire room. You see, Mr. Nadler, this is what real accountability looks like. This is what happens when someone actually reads the public records and asks the hard questions. His voice becomes almost gentle. You started this conversation about accountability and transparency. You wanted to discuss ethical conduct and proper oversight. Well, here we are. The American people are watching, the cameras are rolling, and I think they deserve answers. Smash that like button if you think every politician's financial record should be this thoroughly examined. Comment transparency if you believe the American people deserve answers about foreign agent payments. And subscribe because what Jordan reveals next makes this look like small change. Jordan isn't finished, not even close. What Nadler thought would be a quick political assassination has turned into a systematic dismantling of everything he represents. But the foreign agent payments were just the opening act. Now Jordan is about to deliver a constitutional education that will leave Nadler speechless and the viewing audience stunned. Since we're discussing accountability, Jordan says, his voice taking on the authority of someone who spent 15 years teaching constitutional law, "Let's examine your voting record on federal spending, Mr. Nadler." He pulls out another set of documents from his seemingly bottomless folder. "I took the liberty of calculating every major spending bill you voted for in your 35 years in Congress." Jordan holds up a thick printout. The total comes to approximately $47 trillion in federal spending. That's trillion with a T, Mr. Nadler, $47 trillion. He pulls out his calculator again. Now, let's put that in perspective for the American people watching at home. $47 trillion divided by 330 million Americans equals $140, $424 for every man, woman, and child in this country. The numbers hit the room like physical blows. You can see people in the gallery doing quick math in their heads, trying to comprehend the scale. That means, Mr. Nadler, that your votes alone have committed every American family of four to $569, $696 in federal spending. More than $500,000 per family, before interest, before the debt service, before any of the programs actually work. The spending analysis. Jordan stands up again, his energy building as he moves into his area of expertise. But here's what really interests me, Mr. Nadler. Let's look at the results of all that spending. He begins pulling out charts and graphs, spreading them across the table like a prosecutor laying out evidence. Healthcare costs since your first vote for federal healthcare programs increased 300%. That's not 300% better, that's 300% more expensive. Another chart, education spending since you've been in Congress increased 400%, reading scores flat, math scores declining, science scores worse than countries that spend half as much per student. More evidence. Infrastructure spending during your tenure increased 600%. Our roads D+ grade from the American Society of Civil Engineers, our bridges D grade, our airports D+ grade. Jordan's voice gains intensity. Housing programs trillions, spent homelessness worse than ever. Anti-poverty programs more spending than the entire GDP of most countries, poverty rates virtually unchanged. Environmental programs hundreds of billions, spent climate goals consistently missed. He looks directly at Nadler. So here's my question, Mr. Nadler. If spending $47 trillion was supposed to solve all these problems, why do we still have all the same problems? If you're such an effective legislator, why does nothing actually get better? The constitutional challenge. This is where Jordan delivers the intellectual knockout punch that transforms him from regional politician to constitutional scholar. His voice takes on the authority of someone who's not just read the Constitution, but studied it, taught it, and lived it. But here's my real question, Mr. Nadler, the question that gets to the heart of why we're here today. Jordan walks around to the front of the committee table, positioning himself directly in front of Nadler. You've sworn to uphold the Constitution 18 times in your career. 18 times you've raised your right hand and promised to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. He pulls out a pocket-sized Constitution worn and obviously well-read, "This Constitution, the same one you've sworn to uphold 18 times, establishes a federal government of limited enumerated powers. Article 1, Section 8 lists exactly 18 specific powers granted to Congress. Jordan opens to the relevant page. The power to tax, to regulate interstate commerce, to establish post offices, to coin money, to declare war, 18 specific limited powers. His voice becomes more pointed. So here's my question, Mr. Nadler. Can you tell me which of these 18 enumerated powers authorizes half of what you voted to spend $47 trillion on? A silence, complete devastating silence. Nadler looks genuinely surprised by the constitutional specificity, as if he's never actually considered whether his votes are constitutional. Where in Article 1, Section 8 does it authorize the federal government to take over health care? Jordan continues. Where does it authorize federal control of local education? Where does it authorize climate programs? Where does it authorize most of the social programs you've championed? Jordan begins pacing his energy building. Because I've actually read the Constitution, Mr. Nadler, not just the parts about impeachment that you like to quote when you're trying to remove presidents you don't like, the whole thing, and it establishes a federal government of limited powers, not unlimited good intentions. The personal revelation. Jordan stops pacing and looks directly at Nadler, his voice becoming more personal but no less devastating. You see, Mr. Nadler, the difference between us isn't experience. You're absolutely right. You've been here longer, much longer. The difference is that I remember why I came here. His voice gains emotional intensity. I came here to serve the people of Ohio's 4th District and to uphold the Constitution of the United States. That's it. Those are my two jobs. Serve my constituents and defend the Constitution. Jordan's tone becomes more pointed. But you've been here so long you've forgotten both. You've forgotten that the Constitution limits government power, it doesn't expand it. You've forgotten that we work for the people, not the other way around. He gestures toward the gallery. You've become exactly what the founders feared when they wrote that Constitution, a permanent political class that thinks it knows better than the people it serves. Jordan's voice becomes cutting. They designed a system of limited government because they knew that power corrupts. They created checks and balances because they knew that politicians would try to expand their own authority. They wrote the 10th Amendment because they knew that people like you would try to do exactly what you've been doing for 35 years. He sits back down, but his presence still dominates the room. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people, not to Jerry Nadler, not to career politicians, to the states and to the people. Nadler tries to respond. The Constitution is a living document that must be interpreted. No, sir, Jordan interrupts firmly. The Constitution says what it says, it means what it means, and what it means is that you've been voting for unconstitutional spending for 35 years while claiming to uphold the very document you've been violating. The constitutional education is complete, the intellectual knockout has been delivered, but Jordan isn't done yet. He's about to deliver the moral finishing blow that will end not just this hearing, but Jerry Nadler's entire political career. Comment: Constitution. If you think politicians should actually read the document they swear to uphold, hit that like button if you believe $142,000 per person is too much government spending. And subscribe, because what happens next will be talked about for years. What happens next will be studied in political science courses for decades. It will be the moment that defines both men's legacies. The moment that transforms a routine congressional hearing into political legend. The moment that ends one career and launches another toward the presidency. Jerry Nadler, cornered and desperate, is about to make the fatal error that will destroy everything he's built over 35 years in politics. Nadler's fatal error. You can see the panic in Nadler's eyes now. His carefully planned attack has backfired spectacularly. His foreign agent payments are exposed. His spending record is demolished. His constitutional knowledge has been revealed as fundamentally lacking. He's bleeding politically, and he knows it. Desperate politicians make desperate moves, and desperate moves end careers. Nadler's voice rises, becoming shrill with frustration and anger. Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, you've been in Washington for exactly 7 years. 7 years. I've been here for 35 years. 35 years of experience, of institutional knowledge, of understanding how government actually works. His finger points directly at Jordan, shaking with rage. Perhaps instead of grandstanding with your calculators and your constitutional pocket guides and your simplistic analysis, you should listen to your betters who actually understand the complexities of governance. The words hit the room like a nuclear bomb. Your betters. The silence is so complete you could hear a pin drop 3 rooms away. Even the C-SPAN cameras seem to freeze. Reporters stop typing mid-sentence. Democratic members look like they've been slapped. The gallery gasps audibly. Nadler has just committed the ultimate sin in American politics. He's revealed that he thinks he's better than the people he serves. He's exposed the arrogance that comes with too much power held for too long. He's shown his true contempt for both his colleagues and the American people who pay his salary, but the worst part. The cameras caught every word, every gesture, every second of the most career-ending statement in modern political history, Jordan's devastating response. Jordan's demeanor completely changes. The country lawyer facade drops entirely, revealing something much more dangerous underneath. This isn't the humble congressman from Ohio anymore. This is a constitutional scholar who's just been insulted by someone who's forgotten the most basic principle of American democracy. When Jordan speaks, his voice is quiet, but it carries the force of moral authority. My better's Mr. Nadler. The way he says it, with that mixture of disbelief and righteous anger, immediately tells everyone in the room that Nadler has just made the mistake of his life. Jordan stands up slowly, his movements deliberate and controlled. Let me tell you about my better, sir. His voice begins to rise with genuine emotion. My betters are the single mother in Lima, Ohio, working 2 jobs who can't afford childcare because your government programs are designed to penalize full-time work and keep families dependent on government assistance. Jordan begins pacing his energy building with each example. My betters are the veteran in Dayton waiting 6 months for a VA appointment because the bureaucracy you've built and funded for 35 years is more concerned with protecting its own jobs than serving the heroes who defended our freedom. His voice gains intensity. My betters are the small business owner in Mansfield drowning in regulations that you've never read written by bureaucrats you've never met, enforcing rules that make no sense to anyone who's actually tried to create jobs and build something productive. Jordan stops pacing and plants his feet, his voice becoming thunderous. My betters are the farmer in Shelby County who knows more about feeding America than any politician in Washington, but gets lectured by people who've never grown anything except their own power. The philosophical destruction. Jordan's voice drops to almost a whisper, but somehow it carries to every corner of the room. You know what you've become. Mr. Nadler, you've forgotten the most basic principle of American democracy. You've forgotten that in this country the government serves the people, not the other way around. His voice gains force. You think 35 years in Washington makes you superior to the Americans who pay your salary and trust you with their government. You think sitting in that chair gives you the right to look down on the people who sent you there. Jordan's tone becomes cutting. But that's exactly what's wrong with Washington, Mr. Nadler. Career politicians who've been here so long they think they're royalty instead of public servants. Politicians who've been in power so long they've forgotten that their authority comes from the consent of the governed. He takes a step toward Nadler. You call yourself my better. You call yourself superior to the hardworking Americans who get up every day, go to work, pay their taxes, and trust their government to serve them honestly. Jordan's voice becomes almost gentle, but it's the gentleness of someone delivering a fatal blow. You've been in Washington so long that you've forgotten where you came from. You've been in power so long that you think power is your right instead of your responsibility. You've been surrounded by people who defer to you for so long that you've forgotten what it's like to be accountable to anyone. The moral destruction. This is where Jordan delivers the moral knockout that will be quoted for generations. Let me tell you something, Mr. Nadler. I don't work for you. You don't work for me. We both work for them. He gestures toward the gallery, toward the cameras, toward the American people watching. We work for the American people. We are their employees. They are our employers. They hire us to serve them, and they can fire us when we fail them. Jordan's voice becomes passionate. And you know what makes someone qualified to serve the American people? It's not how long you've been in Washington. It's not how many bills you've passed or how much money you've spent. It's whether you remember that you work for them, not the other way around. His voice becomes devastating. It's whether you remember that in America there are no betters, there are no superiors, there are no ruling classes, there are only Americans, some of whom we temporarily trust with the privilege of serving in their government. Jordan sits back down, but his moral authority still fills the room. And that Mr. Nadler is why it's time for you to go home. Not because you're a bad person, but because you've been there too long to remember what you came there to do, too long to remember whose permission you need to be there, too long to remember that in America nobody is anyone else's better. The destruction is complete. The moral authority has shifted entirely. The cameras have captured the most devastating political moment of the decade. And Jerry Nadler sits in stunned silence, finally understanding that his career just ended with 2 words, "Your betters." Drop a comment with "We the people" if you believe politicians work for us, not the other way around. Smash that like button if you think 35 years is too long for anyone to hold power. And hit subscribe because what Jordan says next will be quoted in history books. The room is still reeling from the "your betters" moment when Jordan delivers his constitutional finishing move. This isn't just political theater anymore. This is a fundamental lesson about American democracy that will be studied for generations. The pocket constitution. Jordan reaches into his jacket pocket and pulls out something that will become iconic, a small, worn, obviously well-read pocket constitution. The same constitution that Jerry Nadler swore to uphold 18 times but apparently never bothered to study. This, Jordan says, holding it up for everyone to see, is what I swore to uphold, Mr. Nadler. Not the Constitution of Jerry Nadler, not the Constitution of the Democratic Party, not the Constitution of career politicians, the Constitution of the United States of America. He opens it with the reverence of someone who actually understands what it represents. And this Constitution, the same one you've sworn to defend 18 times, creates a government of limited powers, not unlimited ambitions. It restrains government, Mr. Nadler. It doesn't empower politicians to rule over people. Jordan begins reading from the actual text, "We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America." He looks up at Nadler. "We the people, Mr. Nadler, not we the politicians, not we the government, not we the better classes, we the people." D. The historical parallel, Jordan's voice takes on the authority of someone who's not just read history but learned from it. The founders who wrote this document had just fought a war against a government that thought it knew better than the people it governed. They had just defeated a king who believed his authority came from divine right rather than the consent of the governed. His tone becomes more pointed. And they designed this system specifically to prevent what you've become, a permanent political class that accumulates power and never gives it up. Jordan begins pacing again, his energy building. They created term limits for the presidency because they knew that power corrupts. They established checks and balances because they knew that politicians would try to expand their authority. They wrote the Bill of Rights because they knew that government would try to control people instead of serving them. He stops and looks directly at Nadler. But most importantly, they established the principle that government power comes from the people, not from the politicians who temporarily exercise it. Jordan's voice becomes cutting. They feared exactly what you've become, Mr. Nadler, a permanent political class more concerned with maintaining power than serving people. They designed this system to prevent career politicians from accumulating the kind of authority you think you deserve. The final constitutional lesson. Jordan returns to his chair, but his voice carries the weight of constitutional authority. You've made politics your career, Mr. Nadler. You've made power your profession. You've made government your personal kingdom. His tone becomes almost professorial. But the Constitution doesn't recognize career politicians. It doesn't acknowledge a ruling class. It doesn't grant anyone the authority to be anyone else's better. That Jordan opens his pocket constitution again. Article 1 establishes a legislature chosen by the people for limited terms to exercise limited powers. Article 2 establishes an executive chosen by the people for a limited term to enforce the laws. Article 3 establishes a judiciary nominated by the executive and confirmed by the legislature to interpret the laws. He looks up. Limited terms, Mr. Nadler. Limited powers. Limited authority. The founders understood that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Jordan's voice becomes more pointed. But you've been there for 35 years. You've accumulated power that the founders never intended any individual to hold. You've become exactly what they designed this system to prevent. The final blow. Jordan closes his pocket constitution and looks directly at Nadler for what will be the final exchange of their political careers. It's not about you being a bad person, Mr. Nadler. I'm sure you came to Washington with good intentions. Most people do. His voice becomes gentle but devastating. It's about you being there too long to remember what you came there to do, too long to remember whose power you're exercising. Too long to remember that in a constitutional republic, power belongs to the people, not to the politicians who temporarily borrow it. Jordan stands up one final time. The Constitution belongs to the American people, not to career politicians. The government belongs to the American people, not to the political class. And the power belongs to the American people, not to anyone who thinks they're someone else's better. He pauses for a moment, letting the weight of history settle on the room. And after 35 years, maybe it's time for you to go home and let someone else serve. Maybe it's time to remember that in America, political power is supposed to be temporary. Maybe it's time to let the Constitution work the way it was designed to work. Jordan sits back down, his constitutional education complete. The founders trusted the American people to govern themselves. Maybe it's time you trusted them too. The silence that follows is absolute. Jerry Nadler stares at the table, unable to meet Jordan's eyes or the cameras. Democratic members look shell-shocked. Even reporters who came expecting to cover Jordan's destruction are furiously rewriting their stories. The constitutional lesson is over, the political assassination is complete, and America has just witnessed what happens when someone who actually understands the Constitution confronts someone who spent 35 years violating it. Comment Constitution. If you think every politician should carry a pocket constitution, like this video if you believe power should be temporary, not permanent. And subscribe because this is what happens when constitutional knowledge meets political arrogance. The constitutional education is complete, but the shockwaves are just beginning. What happens in the next 60 seconds will be replayed millions of times, shared across every social media platform, and studied in political science courses for decades to come. Complete destruction. The committee room falls into absolute silence. Jerry Nadler stares at his hands, unable to form words. The prosecutorial confidence he brought into the room is completely gone, replaced by the hollow look of someone who's just watched 35 years of political capital evaporate in 8 minutes. Staff members look mortified. Democratic committee members shift uncomfortably in their seats, some actually putting physical distance between themselves and Nadler. Even the most partisan Democrats in the room recognize they've just witnessed a political execution. The cameras capture every second of Nadler's shock and silence. The moment that will define the rest of his life. The moment that proves sometimes the most devastating defeats come not from personal attacks but from constitutional truth. Chairman Jordan, meanwhile, sits calmly in his chair, his worn pocket constitution still in his hand. He's not gloating, he's not celebrating. He's simply waiting to see if Nadler has any response to the most comprehensive political and constitutional dismantling in modern congressional history. The silence stretches for what feels like an eternity, but is actually only 23 seconds. 23 seconds that feel like a lifetime to Jerry Nadler and like a moment of triumph to everyone who believes in constitutional government. Media explosion. While the committee room sits in stunned silence, the outside world explodes with unprecedented fury. Social media platforms crash under the volume of shares, likes, and comments flooding their servers. Your Betters begins trending within 90 seconds of Nadler's fatal comment, quickly becoming the #1 trend not just in America, but worldwide. The hashtag represents more than just a political moment. It becomes a rallying cry for everyone who's ever felt looked down upon by their own government. Constitutional education starts trending as clips of Jordan's pocket constitution moment go viral. High school civics teachers across America are already planning to show this video to their students as an example of what constitutional knowledge looks like in practice. Time to go home. Jordan's final words becomes a movement overnight. Conservative activists adopt it as a call for term limits. Liberal Democrats use it to distance themselves from Nadler's arrogance. Even international observers recognize it as a defining moment in American political culture. The most shared clip isn't the foreign agent payments or the spending analysis. It's the 15-second exchange where Nadler says, "Your betters," and Jordan responds with moral authority that transcends partisan politics. The video generates over 10 million views in the first hour alone. CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News all break into regular programming to replay the exchange. Liberal commentators struggle to defend Nadler's "Your Betters" comment. Conservative pundits hail Jordan as the voice of constitutional conservatism. Even moderate analysts recognize they've just witnessed a historic political moment. Political implications. Within 6 hours of the hearing, Jordan's Senate office is flooded with interview requests from major news networks, speaking invitations from conservative organizations, and fundraising opportunities from donors across the country. Republican leadership, many of whom had previously seen Jordan as a useful but regional political figure, now recognize they're looking at a potential presidential candidate. Senator Mitch McConnell releases a statement calling Jordan's performance a masterclass in constitutional leadership. House Speaker Mike Johnson calls it exactly what the American people need to hear. Democratic leadership goes into full damage control mode. House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries releases a carefully worded statement supporting Nadler while avoiding any mention of his actual performance. Senator Chuck Schumer refuses to comment, sending his staff to say he didn't see the hearing. But the most telling reaction comes from moderate Democrats who begin privately expressing concerns about their party's direction. Several moderate House Democrats issue statements supporting respectful discourse and constitutional governance, obvious attempts to distance themselves from Nadler's arrogance without directly criticizing a senior colleague. Progressive Democrats find themselves in an impossible position. They can't defend Nadler's "Your Betters" comment without sounding elitist themselves. They can't attack Jordan's constitutional arguments without appearing to oppose the Constitution itself. They can't dismiss the foreign agent payments without looking like they're ignoring corruption. The broader message. But this moment transcends partisan politics. What Jordan accomplished goes beyond defeating one Democratic politician or scoring points for the Republican Party. He reminded America of fundamental truths that had been forgotten in the day-to-day noise of political combat. He reminded the country that the Constitution isn't a partisan document. It's the foundation of American democracy that everyone in government swears to uphold. He demonstrated that constitutional knowledge isn't academic theory. It's practical wisdom for governing a free people. Most importantly, he reasserted the principle that in America, political power belongs to the people, not to the politicians who temporarily exercise it. The idea that anyone could be anyone else's better is fundamentally un-American, and Jordan's response reminded everyone watching why that principle matters. The hearing that was supposed to be about investigating government corruption and accountability became something much more significant, a reminder that the greatest corruption in government isn't financial, it's moral. It's the corruption that comes when politicians forget they're public servants, not public masters. A new political star overnight, Jim Jordan transforms from a regional political figure into a national conservative icon. His combination of constitutional knowledge, moral authority, and communication skills creates a template that other conservative politicians immediately begin trying to emulate. But more than that, Jordan demonstrates that authentic constitutional conservatism can defeat establishment liberalism not through personal attacks or inflammatory rhetoric, but through superior preparation, deeper knowledge, and unwavering commitment to principle. The country lawyer from Ohio has just given the political establishment a lesson they'll never forget: underestimate constitutional knowledge at your own peril, mock the Constitution at your own risk, and never ever tell the American people you're their better. Jerry Nadler walked into that hearing room as one of the most powerful Democrats in Congress. He walks out as a cautionary tale about what happens when politicians forget who they work for and who they're accountable to. The hearing is over, the constitutional education is complete, and American politics will never be quite the same. Comment accountability if you think this is exactly what congressional oversight should look like. Smash that like button if you believe constitutional knowledge should be required for every politician. Hit subscribe and ring that notification bell because moments like this don't happen often, but when they do, they change everything. This is what democracy looks like when it works. This is what accountability sounds like when it's real, and this is what happens when someone finally says what needed to be said. After 35 years, maybe it's time to go home.